Here is a reality of history that many miss. At the highest levels of influence, the greatest obstacle isn't a competitor, it's the false sense of security built by success. If you've ever wondered why some of history's most prominent figures, the ones who seemed untouchable, lost everything, these stories hold the final answer. We're going to explore the documented accounts of how empires crumble, not from a massive external attack, but from a quiet, internal shift. This is about the moment when power becomes a liability. During the early 20th century, some legendary leaders built organizations that seemed permanent. They possessed the resources, the reach, and the infrastructure. Think about the titans of industry, the political bosses, the figures who shaped entire cities. Their names were synonymous with power. But history reveals a startling pattern. The higher the trajectory, the more sudden the transition. It's rarely a slow decline. More often, it's a sudden, decisive fall from grace. Today, we're going to analyze the documented turning points for these figures to understand why a secure, peaceful departure is so rare in these high-stakes environments. When you build an empire on the edge, the end rarely announces itself. When we look at the official records, we see that the end rarely arrives from a distance. It's not a rival army marching on the gates. It usually happens during a moment of complete calm, when everything appears to be under control. It's the meeting that seems routine, the phone call that feels insignificant, or the trusted ally who suddenly has a different agenda. The danger isn't in the chaos. It's in the quiet moments when you believe you're most secure. That's when the ground shifts beneath your feet. This is the central paradox of extreme power. The moment you feel invincible is often the moment you are most vulnerable. History teaches us that influence is only as strong as the people who continue to benefit from it. The moment your leadership stops serving the interests of your inner circle, your influence becomes a house of cards. Take the case of the man known as the New York Strategist in 1931. In his era, he was the central figure. Politicians, businessmen, and lawmen all sought his favor. His word was law. He sat for a meal with a trusted peer, believing his position was absolute, unshakable. But the reality was different. His leadership, once essential, had become an obstacle to progress and profit for those around him. When his peers stood up and stepped away from the table, it wasn't a coincidence. It was a signal for a total change in management. The men who carried out the change were waiting. The lesson is brutally clear. In any high-pressure world, loyalty is often a temporary calculation based on current needs. When you are no longer the most profitable or strategic option, allegiance can and will shift. And this next part shows how even the most sophisticated infrastructure can fail when the landscape shifts. It's not about having more resources. It is about understanding that the very tools you use to build your power can also be used to dismantle it. The documented records show that no amount of money, technology, or manpower can protect a legacy from the consequences of certain paths. The international figure is a prime example. By 1993, he had gone from a global leader of a massive organization to an isolated individual on the run. His downfall wasn't caused by a lack of funds. He had billions. It was caused by a single communication that lasted just a little too long. The very satellite systems he used to build his reach, to coordinate his global operations, were the same systems that ultimately identified his location and pinpointed him for his rivals. The lesson here is that the tools of power are neutral. They can build you up, but they can just as easily bring you down. Then, consider the events in Chicago in 1929. The St. Valentine's Day Massacre wasn't a random act of violence. It was a strategic masterpiece of deception. A prominent group didn't lose control because of a lack of preparation or firepower. They lost because of a calculated maneuver that exploited their own sense of security. Seeing individuals who appeared to be officials, they followed standard protocols, lowering their guard and assuming they were safe. By the time they realized it was a strategy orchestrated by their competitors, the situation was already finalized. They were trapped by their own assumptions. Their belief in a certain order of things, even in their chaotic world, was used against them. Even the Las Vegas visionary, a man who built a desert empire and revolutionized an entire industry, could not outrun economic reality. His vision was legendary. But when his main project became a massive financial burden, his partners and financiers began to see him not as a visionary, but as a liability. His support system dissolved. They didn't need a rival to take him down. They simply needed to protect their own investments. His story concluded not in a Vegas penthouse, but in relative obscurity in California, because he was no longer an asset to the organization. He had become an unsustainable cost. His genius was undeniable, but in the end, the balance sheet won. Finally, consider the individual who spent decades in isolation, a ghost in his own former empire, only to have his journey end at age 89 in an institutional setting. His long years on the run proved one thing. Time does not erase the record. It doesn't forgive or forget. It simply waits for the final account to be settled. His life ended not with a bang, but with the quiet closing of a file. A final entry in a long and complicated ledger. These documented accounts, from New York to Chicago to Las Vegas, represent the real-world results of paths that are often over-glamorized by modern media. The reality is far less glamorous and far more cautionary. So what is the ultimate lesson from these historical figures? It's this: stability is far more valuable than temporary power. Lasting success is never built on fear, intimidation, or risky ventures that place you at odds with the world. If you want to build a legacy that stands the test of time, it must be built on integrity, legitimate value, and a foundation that doesn't require constant conflict to maintain. The secret to a lasting journey is undoing how to win a fight. Knowing how to build something that does unrequire one in the first place. Create value, build relationships based on mutual respect, and understand that true strength lies in sustainability, not dominance. History shows that the final account is always settled. Learn from these records so you can build a future that lasts. Thanks for watching. If you found this analysis valuable, consider subscribing for more deep dives into the lessons history has to teach us. See you next time.